Hello friends, this video is for the discussion of your NEET Grand Test 12 Endodontics and Conservative Dentistry paper. First question, which of the following is instruments is not used in any stage of obturation? This is for from your endodontic armamentarium. So you use spreader, yes, for your lateral compaction. You use pluggers for your warm vertical compaction, lentillar spiral for your application of sealer. So barbed broach is not used during obturation. That is basically for pulpectomy. Next question, prolonged mixing of MTA is not done, right? And immediately when you mix it, you should just, in its wet sand or its, putty-like consistency, you should apply it, put it in the cavity prep or perforation repair or whatever you are wanting to use it for. Why? Because if you do prolonged mixing, there'll be loss of moisture. It would get dry and crumbly. It would compromise its physical and mechanical properties like strength, and it may also play around, shorten the setting time also. So dehydration of MTA obviously is your answer. Pain on heat, which is relieved by cold. Now this is very typical. This is a slightly controversial question. Why? Because there is still pain on heat, right? So this is typically seen in a necrotic tooth, guys. You have a root canal, deep caries, the tooth is necrotic, there is bacteria inside which has colonized the infected necrotic root canal space. So when there's heat, the bacterial byproducts, the products, that's pyruvic acid, lactic acid, they're all released as a byproduct of glycolysis, right? So these anaerobic bacteria, these gases, these gaseous byproducts, these gaseous acids, they kind of expand and they leak into the periapical spaces, causing pressure, pain in the periodontium. And that pain is relieved by cold. So that's very typical of a necrotic pulp. That's what Cohen says. So necrotic pulp is the best answer here. C factor is maximum. So C factor is basically talking about the configuration factor. So class 5. So for class 5, right, and class 1, the number of bonded surfaces are 5, free surface is 1, okay? So C factor is 5, okay? Then the other important value is, so 5 is the C factor here. For class 4, it's 0.5, and incisal edge restoration, that is class 6 for anteriors, it's 0.2, okay? For class 5 and 1, it's 5. For class 2, the value is 2. So maximum values for class 5 and class 1. So here the answer is class 5, that's option D. Next question, predominant cells in asymptomatic apical periodontitis. Now this is basically talking about a chronic apical periodontitis or a periapical granuloma. Yes, he's talking about a periapical granuloma. Granuloma, from your path, you know that it is a chronic inflammatory lesion. And you have chronic inflammatory cells, which are lymphocytes and monocytes. So you have lymphocytes and macrophages. C is the answer. Then the next question is gingival bevel. So guys, in any class 2, now this is a great question. Why? If you have a class 2 inlay, a cast metal restoration, then you have to give a bevel on every margin, even if that margin is on dentine or cementum. This is opposed to the concept of giving a bevel for a composite restoration, right? If you've seen my videos on operative dentistry, we've discussed in great detail that, beveling for a composite restoration only makes sense when your margins are in enamel, right? Because you're beveling for better retention form, for better bonding. Whereas for a cast metal inlay, you're beveling to get a better marginal fit, number one, because you're able to burnish a thin section of metal. And secondly, you get a better resistance form because your marginal marginal tooth angle, whether it's in enamel or whatever. So a cavo surface angle is obtuse, greater than 90 degrees. So it gives bulk to the tooth, remaining tooth at the margin. So you have better resistance form, okay? So whether it's in enamel, whether it's in dentine, whether it's in cementum, you will always be well. That's one. Second is what he's talking about is gingival bevel in a class 2. So this is the mesiodistal section. So what he's talking about is this bevel. Now again, even if this, so for a class 2 amalgam also you give a bevel, but that's not exactly a bevel. That's simply ensuring that if your cervical third, if your gingival seat is in the cervical third, then you just have to follow the enamel rods with a declination angle of 15 to 20 degrees, right? Just be parallel to the enamel rods so that your cavo surface angle remains 90. That is critical, essential for the success of amalgam. But here again, this is class 2 cast metal inlay or even an onlay. The gingival seat for an inlay or onlay, even if it is on enamel or on the root surface, you will give a bevel. And here the bevel, the concept is 30 to 40 degrees, right? So the closest answer would be 35 degrees, better than 40 degrees. The answer for a gingival bevel is closer to 30 degrees, right? The other bevels on the occlusal margins on the proximal surfaces, they are in the range of 30 to 40 degrees. Gingival bevel is slightly more, shallow in angle. That's 30 to 35 degrees. So best answer is 35 degrees here. If you had the option of 30 degrees, that would have been the best answer. Which of the horizontal root fractures has the most favorable prognosis? Now this is basically talking about this, that you have this root, that's your tooth, okay? So you can have potentially fractures in the cervical third, middle third, and the apical third. So in the apical third is the best prognosis. Why? Because usually the entire coronal fragment remains well supported by your bone, okay? And usually in such situations, almost 100% of the cases, the apical, in the apical segment, the pulp remains vital. In the coronal segment, also very high chances that even if the pulp turns necrotic due to trauma, it would revascularize, it would regenerate on its own. So the only treatment that you do actually for a middle third or an apical third root fracture is splinting if it is mobile. In an apical third, even splinting is many times not required. You just have to observe and let it be. Okay. So best prognosis is for apical third root fractures. Next question is the most used type of tooth preparation design for class 3 composite. If you again remember my videos on operative dentistry, for any composite restoration, you have 3 designs. Yes, you have conventional. We have a conventional box type design, okay, which is basically a box type which is similar to amalgam. Then we have a beveled conventional. This is again a box type design, but when the cavity prep is on the crown surface. So you have enamel margins, you can bevel them, okay? And then you have the modified prep. This is again for those class 3, class 4, class 5, class 1s, in which you have your entire prep on the crown surface. Okay, the size of the cavity is small to moderate. So size of the cavity prep is small to moderate, right? The entire prep is on the crown surface. So that is, so if, just for example, let us look at this lower, say, incisor and a class 3 restoration, right? So that's a small prep completely on the crown. Okay, that's one situation. The other situation would be a class 5, again, completely on the crown. The good thing here is that you can simply do a modified prep. Just take a simple round burr and scoop this lesion out and just keep your initial preparation depth 0.2 mm inside the DEJ. You don't need to extend it to 0.5 mm inside the DEJ because modified prep is for small and moderate sized lesions. So you have adequate retention by bonding, especially when you are on the crown surface. You can bevel all these enamel margins. So you don't really require any secondary retention residence grooves, right? So therefore, your initial depth is also pretty shallow. And you're relying on micromechanical bonding. And this modified prep design is actually the one which is most conservative for a composite, and that's why it's the most used. Most commonly used is the modified prep design. Next question is carbide burr is better suited for removal of. So he's basically talking about that, you have carbides versus diamonds, right? So diamonds are good for cutting brittle materials, brittle substrates, that is enamel, like porcelain or ceramic, and carbides are better suited to cut ductile substrates like dentine, okay? Like dentine. Yes, like dentine. So answer is dentine here. The most used type of tooth preparation designed for class 3, I think this is a repeat, so that's modified, that's pretty simple. Which of the following is true for Diagnodent? Good question, guys. There's actually a new question that I made, a tough one. What is Diagnodent, guys? It is a laser fluorescence device. It uses laser fluorescence. So what wavelength is it using? It's using red, intense red light, which is somewhere in the region of 650 nanometers. Okay. So when this is made incident on the tooth, then what happens is that the bacteria inside the tooth, right, they would cause fluorescence. That means they would absorb this red wavelength and release the infrared wavelength. Okay. So the amount of fluorescence, greater the fluorescence that would be detected by the detector or the receiver of the Diagnodent pen, means greater is the bacteria. Okay. So yeah, it's good for caries detection. Yes, it's a diagnostic tool. So either C is the answer or D is the answer, isn't it? Yes. The other important thing is that Diagnodent has got very high sensitivity. Okay, but it has a low specificity. Now, what do we mean by this, guys? Sensitivity means, I'm not talking about high sensitivity, I'm talking about sensitivity. If a test is very sensitive, high in sensitivity, it means low false negatives. Okay. And if a test has very good high specificity, means it has got low false positives. Now, the problem with Diagnodent pen is it has low specificity, which implies that it has got high false positives, but it has got a very high sensitivity. So that means it has got low false negatives. What does this mean, guys? So first of all, let's look at the answer. So it has high sensitivity and low specificity. So used for caries detection, it has got high sensitivity and low specificity. That is the answer. This is the answer. Okay. That's one important thing. The other important thing is, what do you mean by this low false negatives? Meaning that if it has said that there is no bacteria here, then it's very rare for it to be wrong, right? So it has got low false negatives, right? It would be a right assumption. What do you mean by high false positive? Meaning that if it is saying that yes, there is caries here because of the fluorescence that it is receiving from the bacteria, it can be a false result. Why? Because bacteria from the plaque also, if there is no caries but there's bacteria in the plaque, then that would also release a lot of fluorescence, right? That would also release a lot of infrared light. That would be wrongly interpreted as caries. So that's why specificity is low. So the best answer is D here. Okay, the best answer is D. It is used for caries detection, has high sensitivity and low specificity, right? Slightly tough question. Yes, conceptual. This is easy, guys. This I always do very extensively in my classes. This is a cross section of a carbide burr, right? If you see the rake angle, it's slightly negative. Why? Because if you draw the radius here, then the rake face is ahead. Okay, Whenever the rake face is ahead, the rake angle is slightly negative. So this is basically a section of the carbide burr. Next question, what is this, guys? This is basically a cylinder which is having carbon dioxide, right? And you pull the trigger here and you collect carbon dioxide snow here, okay? And carbon dioxide snow is considered one of the best cold tests. Why? Because of its intense cold, right? Its temperature goes up to minus 90 degrees Celsius. So it's very good for checking the vitality of a tooth without removing the crown. If the tooth is crowned, okay, there's a full coverage crown on it, and you want to test the vitality. The the cold temperature is so intense that it can traverse the surface of the crown and reach the tooth. So what's the best answer here? Carbon dioxide snow. It is considered the test of choice for evaluating pulpal response in teeth with full coverage restorations. Right? So A is the answer here. Simple enough. Next question, what is the Vertucci classification? This is simple, guys. Two canals exiting from the pulp chamber remain separate throughout. That's Vertucci type 4. I told you in the recordings and the class also that type 4 is simple, just 4 divided by 2. Okay, so 2 canals. Quick revision of Vertucci: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right, 7, 8. So 1 is simple, 1 canal, 2 is 2 merging in 1, 3 is 1, 2, 1, 4 is 2, 5 is 1 dividing into 2, 6 is 2 merging into 1, then again dividing into 2, 7 is 1, 2, 1, 2, and 8 is 3 canals throughout. Okay, right? So Vertucci type 4 is the answer here. Yes. So this was the discussion of your NEET GT12 endo and cons paper, guys. Keep believing in yourself. Wish you all the very best. Stay focused. Keep taking your God's name. Best wishes. Thank you, guys.